Well, what do you think about that intro? How are you doing, ladies and gentlemen? It's been a while. I know. It's been too long since we've had one of these updates. My apologies. In truth, about half of the issue is my son's hockey schedule. So his games started to land on Wednesdays. What can you do? So it's been, I think, about a month since I've had an update. And I'm afraid Brandy was not available this week because she's getting ready for Thanksgiving tomorrow, but she'll be back with us next week. And I'm hoping to have a few other guests on moving forward as well. So much has happened over the past month, and I won't be able to focus on it all. But I am going to update you on some of the main developments in the United States election world. That's what these Wednesday night live streams focus on, essentially the 2024 election. And if you're a regular, you understand that. If you're not, and you happen to be here, welcome, and you'll find out. You'll find out why we have a weekly live stream just focusing on developments related to the 2024 US general election. So, the first thing I'm going to focus on is the Rockland County lawsuit brought forward by Smart Legislation, which is the legislative or the action arm, I think, as they call it, of Smart Elections. So that is headed
the Board of Elections is saying that smart legislation.
This woman here, Lulu Freisdat, and I wanted to give you the update that Lulu just presented over the past couple of days. You know, I saw it today for the first time. I'm not entirely sure when it was released, but the bad news is the smart election lawsuit in Rockland County, New York, has been dismissed. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, sure, there you go, of course, another crazy election fraud case getting dismissed. They all get dismissed. They're all just crazy. Well, that's not what happened in this case. It got dismissed because when you bring a lawsuit, you have to have a plaintiff, and you have to have a plaintiff who resides in the jurisdiction where you're bringing the lawsuit. So Smart Elections identified a very good case for election fraud in Rockland County, New York. But Smart Elections isn't based in Rockland County, New York. And even if they were, well, I suppose if they were residents there and they voted there, they could actually, they could possibly bring a case. But they need somebody who not only lives in Rockland County, but has an interest in this complaint. So they would need somebody who ran, for example, for a position like senator, like Diane Sayer did in Rockland County, and who felt that they had votes stolen from them, you know, and had evidence that votes were stolen from them. So you need that plaintiff in the jurisdiction where you're bringing the complaint. So what Lulu Freisdat is explaining is they had plaintiffs, they had Diane Sayer, and they had two people who voted for her, who were willing to sign a sworn affidavit and say, yeah, I voted for her. And in their respective precincts in Rockland County, some of these individuals who voted for Diane Sayre, the official results in their precincts were nobody voted for Diane Sayre for senator or representative. Senate. She was running for Senate, I believe. And then you have these individuals saying, well, what are you talking about? Nobody voted for her. I voted for her. So when things like that happen, it becomes very obvious that something fishy is happening with the votes, right? So you need individuals like that who have kind of skin in the game, if you will. They have an interest in this case in order to bring the case forward, to present a case, a complaint to the courts. If you don't have that, then you will not have standing to bring the case. Even if you have tons of evidence, like Smart Elections does. They focused on the down ballot drop-off rate, and I apologize. I mean, it would have been a good thing to show you, the kind of evidence that they had to bring their case. It was, to my mind, it was a slam dunk, because what Smart Elections was asking for was just a recount. They're not saying overturn the election. They're just saying, hey, there's definitely fishy things going on here, because when I talk about the down ballot drop-off rate, what I'm talking about is you have this situation where the presidential candidate gets either more or less votes than the next person down the ballot from their same party. So imagine Kamala Harris, for example, getting 100 votes in a certain precinct. But then the Democratic Senate candidate, the person running for senator in that same county, gets 120 votes. That would be kind of weird, right? Because if a person is supporting the Democrats by voting for the Democratic senator, the Senate candidate, why wouldn't they also vote for the Democratic presidential candidate, right? So, hey, if that kind of thing happened every now and then, here and there, a weird county there, a weird county here, yeah, fair enough. But when Smart Elections and when the Election Truth Alliance look into that issue, which is, it's a lot of number crunching, but it's fairly simple. You just add up all the votes for, you just look at what the votes are for the Senate candidate for a given party in a given county. And then you compare that to the total number of votes for the Democratic candidate for president. And you see if they had more or less. Well, what you should see there, what's normal, is the presidential candidate gets a few more votes. And that's largely an artifact of people just going in to vote and just going, I'm just voting for the president. I don't have time for this. I don't know who all these other people are down here. I don't have time for this. They just vote for president and hand in their ballot. Some people do that. And so for that reason, what is normal, what is typical, what is expected is to see the presidential candidate for a given party get 1, 2, maybe 3% more of the vote, more votes than their candidate, the candidate from their same party down the ballot, whether that's a senator or a representative, a House representative, the next person down the ballot. So what did they find in Rockland County? Donald Trump constantly, I'm sorry, I don't have the graph in front of me to show you. I should have. I should have set that up. But what you see in virtually every county is Donald Trump gets more, and significantly more, like above that 1 to 3% threshold that's kind of normal and expected. No, instead we're looking at 5, 6, 7% more votes than the Republican candidate for senator. Again, if you're going to vote for Donald Trump because you're a Republican, why wouldn't you also vote for the Republican senator? So the argument would have to be, well, Your Honor, all these Republicans, I don't know how would they make out this argument? Well, the Republicans are so busy earning money, trying to hold this country up, they just don't have time to vote for all those other people down the ballot. They just vote for the top dog because they know Donald Trump will get it done. And then they get back to working. I guess, I don't know, I'm just speculating about what the argument would be. And then in almost every county, you see the opposite for Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris constantly getting fewer votes than the Democratic Senate candidate, significantly fewer. Again, 4, 5, 6, 7% fewer votes, less votes than the Democratic Senate candidate. So people are voting for this Democratic senator, but not voting for the Democratic, presidential candidate. So again, what would the story be? What would you say to the judge? Well, Your Honor, I don't know. I'm trying to make this up as I go along. Well, Your Honor, it basically has to be something to do with, well, these people, they're Democrats, So, they vote for these Democratic candidates. But Kamala Harris, Your Honor, she's just so terrible. She's just so awful that they couldn't bring themselves to vote for her. So they just left that part blank. Or they didn't leave it blank. They voted for Donald Trump. So what would the argument be? Oh, you had all these people voting for a Democratic senator, but then voting for Donald Trump. In this highly polarized nation where families break up over whether they support Trump or whether they support the Democrats, whether they're MAGA. So can we really make the argument that across every county, almost every county, people in Rockland County, in all these precincts, in every precinct or virtually every precinct, my apologies, I've been saying county, and in this context, we're looking at the Rockland County lawsuit. So what I mean to say, they were focused on this one county. So when I've been saying every county, I should have been saying every precinct. But in every precinct, almost every precinct, the vast majority of precincts, Kamala Harris got fewer votes than the Democratic Senate candidate. And that's just completely not normal at all. And Kamala Harris, by every measure, was a fantastic candidate, right? She had basically everything going for her. I suppose a person could take issue if a person were to analyze this and say, well, what would she have going against her? I think the only thing they could say is she was a woman. But personally, I think that would be an asset in this context. I would think right off the bat, most women would vote for her. They might tell their husbands that they're going to vote for Trump, but then go and vote for Kamala Harris. I honestly don't know what else someone would say, suggesting that Kamala Harris wasn't an amazing candidate. I mean, look at the rallies. They were nutso. They were crazy, like just packed to the rafters. Whereas Donald Trump's rallies, they're half-filling stadiums. They're shutting off the upper decks, keeping the cameras pointed in certain directions. And you'd still have, you'd have all this video sneaking out that people would take, showing all the empty seats and showing people leaving during the rallies. Anyways, I digress. What I want to, the point being that in Rockland County, there was a great deal of evidence suggesting that the election was fraudulent. So, forgive me, this video is going to start up.
The Board of Elections is saying,
and then I'm going to stop it. Sorry, it's just how it works with the streaming stuff. So this is Lulu Freistat, and here she's explaining why the case was dismissed in Rockland County and why they lost standing. So here is Lulu Freistat.
The Board of Elections is saying that smart legislation does not have standing to bring this case. And they're saying that because a number of the plaintiffs left the case. Diane Sayre, who was a candidate for Senate in the 2024 election, and 2 voters who voted for her were originally plaintiffs along with smart legislation, but they did leave the case. We believe Diane Sayre was intimidated into leaving the case, and therefore we don't think that the standing argument should hold because there was foul play, in our opinion, in regard to her leaving. When Diane first started this case, she was very, very enthusiastic and assertive, and she was not intimidated in the least. I'm going to play you a video that she made in December of 2024, and you're going to see she was very eager to pursue the case. This is not Diane Sayre. This is a woman named Cynthia Pooler who's interviewing Diane Sayre. And I just put together a few clips so you can really see just how assertive Diane was.
Welcome to Cynthia's Political Playbook. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is my friend Diane Sayre. And Diane ran for the United States Senate in New York in 2022 for Senate against Schumer, and in 2024 against Kirsten Gillibrand. So, Diane, wasn't it fun?
It was fun. So I decided to run against Schumer, actually, particularly because of the comments he made when General Flynn and then later Donald Trump said he wanted to audit the intelligence agencies. And that, I thought, was a very good idea, long overdue. And Schumer was on with Rachel Maddow, who asked him about this. And he said, oh, that's a dumb idea. The intelligence agencies have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. And when he said that, it indicated to me who owns him. And I think that's a big problem. And someone with my background, as I said, having worked with LaRouche, who had 400 FBI agents show up at his house and spent 5 years in federal prison, I'm not going to be intimidated by that, and I want to take these agencies on. How can they deny doing a hand count of the paper ballots?
Has the Board of Elections been in contact with you? They must be furious with you.
Probably. We just served notice to them yesterday. Formally. Okay. So they probably are. And they should be scared. They're breaking the law. And I would just like to draw the implications of this, because people may say, well, so what? You lost. Who cares if you got 0.5% of the vote or 10% of the vote? But my point is that we have a runaway Congress. They don't have to listen to our opinion.
So there you go. That's Diane Sayre. She was running for Senate in Rockland County, New York. And looking at the data, my understanding of the data is, she probably would not have won. But nonetheless, she happened to be in this situation where it became very clear in a number of precincts that people voted for her, and yet no votes were recorded for her. And that's why she ended up serving a critical role in bringing this case forward. It really wasn't just about her per se. The data kind of speaks for itself. And again, my apologies. I didn't think through this presentation tonight. I should have shown you some of the data. Maybe I can on the fly. Yeah, just bear with me here. So I'm going to just add in a screen here.
The Board of Elections is saying
thank you
that
for
smart
your
legislation does not have
indulgence.
standing to bring this case. And they're saying that because a number of the plaintiffs left the case. Diane Sayre, who was a candidate for Senate in the 2024 election, and 2 voters who voted for her were originally plaintiffs along with smart legislation, but they did leave the case. We believe Diane Sayre
Forgive
was
me.
intimidated
So
into
hopefully
leaving
I'm
the
sharing a screen. That's a funny shape screen here. But here, maybe I'll maximize this. Odd that it's so wide. Now, hopefully, when I move around here, you'll see what I'm seeing here. Let's go to the drop off. All right, and do we have some nice? I'd like to see all the precincts. There. These folks tend to aggregate the drop off. Oh, lovely. Okay, so although this is North Carolina, let me just make sure you're seeing this. Right. So I guess, right. I went to another page. That's okay. I know what I have to do. I just have to replace this with, if you're still with me, thanks so much. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully you can see this now. I'm just going to double check. Yeah. Okay. So what we're looking at here, now this is not, well, just let me make sure. This is a comparison of drop-off rates from president to attorney general by county for North Carolina. But it's a rather dramatic, and I've seen plenty of graphs like this. Texas is really crazy, and Texas has, I think, over 200 counties. And it's particularly absurd, when you see it over and over again. But hopefully you can see this. Can I make this any bigger? No, that's the big version. So I can see it a little better. Oh, actually, what if I zoom in? If I zoom in, I want you to be able to see that this is indeed North Carolina. Let me just double check here. Yeah, okay. That's a little better. So I've talked to my streaming service that it would be great if they could incorporate a pointer. That would be great. But moving left to right along this, you see all these blue bars that are hanging down below 0%, as reaching as far down as 20%. Was it like, really, ladies and gentlemen? If you understand, I don't want to sound condescending, but if as you gain more familiarity with this, you come to learn how absurd this is. Like, it's just absolutely absurd. I find it hard to come up with analogies, but it's kind of similar to, when you have a really young child and maybe they snuck cookies from the cookie jar, and they've been eating cookies and they've got crumbs and chocolate all smeared all over their face and stuff. And you say to them, did you eat a cookie? And they're like, no, I didn't eat a cookie. No. And they've got the chocolate and the crumbs and stuff. And it's kind of like that. These blue bars basically shouldn't be there. Red bars shouldn't be there either. Like, basically, in negative territory, that's a very odd thing. It's extremely odd. Maybe, if you look at some, again, forgive me if I had a pointer, I could point this out. But if you look kind of around 10 bars in, you see a little tiny smidgen of a blue bar dropping down. It wouldn't even be 1%, or it'd be close to 1%. I mean, maybe you might expect to see something like that every now and then. But this is just nuts. This is North Carolina. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bars approaching or exceeding negative 20%. That's absolutely crazy. Nothing that is nothing even approaching realistic. Like, it's not in the ballpark of realistic. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you had any thoughts that, oh yeah, our election system in the States was very secure. No, somebody's playing with your election system and just making the outcome whatever they want. And in this case, it's obvious they want Donald Trump to win. So you really shouldn't expect to have any negative down ballot drop-off rate where the presidential candidate gets fewer votes than the next person down the ballot. In this case, it was the Attorney General. That's what they were comparing it to. So the Attorney General I'm just going to take a very close look here. This is the 2024 general presidential election. And there are no counties, ladies and gentlemen, in North Carolina, 0 counties in North Carolina where Kamala Harris got even the same number of votes as the the Democratic Attorney General. Ridiculous. Whereas Donald Trump always, again, looking very carefully just to make sure I'm not mistaken. Yeah, no. Donald Trump, every single county got more votes than the Republican Attorney General candidate. Now, that in of itself is not unusual. Like I said earlier, you should expect between 1% and 3% above a down ballot candidate. And that results from the fact that 1% to 3% of voters just vote for the president and hand in their ballot and get on their merry way. But as you can see, I mentioned to you before that typically he's in this election, he's getting 5, 6, 7% above the person down the ballot from his same party, and that is unusual. So you can see near the right side, you can see one really tiny one where he just seems to get like 1 or 2% more. That's normal. That's kind of what we should expect to see. This malarkey bears no relation to normal reality. So, what can I tell you, ladies and gentlemen? Like, this is utter nonsense. Like, that's just a rigged election. Anyways, I'm going to show you more evidence related to other issues. So this tends to be the kind of data that Smart Elections, Lulu Freisdat, and Smart Elections focuses on. And if they could have had standing in Rockland County, then they could have focused on this issue. Now, I'm just kind of wondering whether they've got anything. Yeah, well, they've got. I don't know. I won't go down too far down that rabbit hole, if you will, with respect to Smart Elections and the kind of evidence that they like to present, but they really focus on drop-off rate. So here's the kind of the typical things. I just don't find, for whatever reason, when they aggregate it this way, it's just not quite as compelling. It doesn't have the same visceral impact when you're looking at it, because they instead of looking at individual precincts or individual counties, they just aggregate them. And when we see it in the aggregate, people could just very easily go, yeah, whatever. Too bad, so sad. Trump got more votes than the next person down the ballot, and Harris got less votes. No big deal. Whatever. But when you see it across every single county, that's when I think it hits you both intellectually and emotionally. You're kind of thinking, well, wait a minute. Every single county, right? So you lose that resolution when you just aggregate it like this. Nonetheless, I'll show you a few more things. So what they're saying here is, on this graph on the left, that look at non-swing states. To the point I was making earlier, in non-swing states, both the candidates get more votes than the next person from their same party down the ballot. Right? That's what it's saying. But then over the to the left of the left, there's two graphs here, and we're just looking at the left one. But even in the left graph, again, I wish I had a pointer. I wonder if you can. No, I guess you can't see this. My pointer. The left part of the left-hand graph is showing swing states, aggregating. This is aggregating not all non-swing states and not all swing states, but most swing states, and then a sample of non-swing states. So I guess a person could say, oh, you just cherry-picked, non-swing states where this was the case. We'd have to crunch a lot of data to see whether somebody actually cherry-picked or not. This is very labor intensive to go about collecting all this data. But nonetheless, in the swing states, that's where you see the tomfoolery. That's where you see the nonsense. That's where you see the small child with cookie crumbs and chocolate smeared all over their face saying, no, I didn't eat a cookie. This is ridiculous, right? You can see kind of what's more normal in the non-swing states. And then for it to jump up where Donald Trump gets so many more votes than the person down the ballot from his same party. I can't emphasize that enough. From his same party. Why would they vote for him but then not vote for the Republican candidate down the ballot? And then Harris gets fewer votes than the candidate down the ballot from her same party. From her same party. Again, why would they vote for the person down the ballot, but then not vote for why would they vote for the Democratic candidate down the ballot, but then not vote for her? That's nonsense. That basically never happens. It might happen like, oh, my aunt really, hated that presidential candidate, so they're a Republican, but they didn't vote for the Republican candidate because they really hated that person. Sure, here and there, this person or that person, fair enough. But this is aggregate. This is saying this is the trend. This is what the population did. And that doesn't happen. That's not normal. That needs interference, for manipulation for that to occur. And that's the case that Smart Elections was bringing in Rockland County. So what happened? The plaintiffs were intimidated very clearly. Lulu Freisdat, I'll just put her up here.
The Board of Elections.
This is Lulu Freisdat. It's not a great place to freeze here. There we are. That's more normal looking. I've heard her explain this case, this issue, a number of times, and she makes the point that Diane Sayer was really determined, really really committed to this case, wanted to get to the bottom of this, wanted to find out what's going on with their elections. And then all of a sudden, I forget the exact quote that Lulu Freistat was saying, but she was saying, I'm sorry, I've just got to get out of this. I'm sorry, I can't. I can't talk about this. I got to get out. I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm sorry, I can't. Clearly, intimidated. So to go this far, and the case had proceeded further than most would expect. They were able to subpoena, for example, a lot of documents from the Board of Elections from Rockland County, the Rockland County Board of Elections. And they were amazed at all the documents. They got thousands of pages of documents, and it was very illuminating. So they got quite far. And then to get that far, and then all of a sudden, these two voters that voted for Diane Sayer and Diane Sayer all together, all at once, said, sorry, we can't, I'm sorry, we can't do it. I'm sorry, I can't talk about it. And they just took off. Clearly intimidation. Do we have proof? No, but we have evidence, because I want to remind everybody, I just like to mention this every now and then. I taught law for 30 years. Evidence is anything that would persuade a trier of fact to take one position or another on an issue of fact. All right, so a fact is something tangible that exists or something that happened. Did that person have a gun or didn't they? Is that person 5'10" or not? These are facts. And an issue is a question. Are they or aren't they? Did he or didn't she? So the question, the issue of fact here is, was Diane Sayer intimidated or coerced into dropping this case? That is an issue of fact, because if they could prove that she was, the case could proceed, because it's been dismissed now based on the argument that Smart Elections on their own, if they don't have plaintiffs from Rockland County, then they don't have standing. It's not their case. It's not their issue to complain about. You literally file a complaint when you file a lawsuit. Well, they don't have standing to complain. It's not their, it's none of their business, right? If they don't have plaintiffs. So the plaintiffs, poof, all of a sudden took off, didn't want to talk about, just had to get out. Didn't explain why. So what I want to point out here is Lulu Freistat, who you're looking at right here from Smart Elections, she has listened to Diane Sayer and listened to these two people who voted for her. She interacted with them, communicated with them before, when they were very eager to proceed with this case. And she's communicated with them. She has observed them after they made the decision to pull out of the case. And she describes their disposition. She describes their personality. That's why she wanted to show us that video of Diane Sayer, and to show us how eager she was, how determined she was, how committed she was to trying this case. And then all of a sudden, she's like, no, I can't do it. I'm sorry. I can't explain why. I can't be involved in this. I can't. Sorry. Don't call me. So her observations, Lulu Freistat's observations of Diane Sayer, actually are evidence. She is a material witness. A material witness is someone who perceived something with their senses that is relevant to the case. And it's the issue of fact here of whether Diane Sayre was coerced into dropping this case or into pulling out is definitely an issue of fact, because if Smart Elections could prove that fact, they could regain standing, because the only reason they lost standing was because the plaintiffs were coerced into dropping the case. And if the court systems permitted that, nobody would ever be charged with anything, because you just coerce people into dropping the case. So they won't accept that. If you coerce somebody into dropping a case, you won't necessarily lose standing, if a third party is bringing the case. So there you go. Very, very clearly, somebody does not want the votes to be recounted in Rockland County. And they intimidated, that's just, to my mind, is just plain as day. They've intimidated the plaintiffs into dropping the case. They did not, nobody, to my knowledge, has addressed Lulu Freisdat here. Lulu Freisdat has been working away at this issue, election security in the United States, for 2 decades. She probably does not intimidate easily. So whoever wanted to intimidate somebody probably saw the plaintiffs as the easiest target and not Lulu Freisdat, who's kind of part of a bit of an organization called Smart Elections. So if anything, try to intimidate her, she just use that as evidence, and just say, Your Honor, they tried to intimidate me. Here's a video. Here's a recording. She'd, probably eat that up. But, I certainly don't want to, I don't want to make light of whatever somebody said or did to Diane Sayre. I'm sure it was very serious. I doubt it was like, whatever. We'll tell them that you cheated on your math test in grade 10. I doubt it was that. I'm sure it was life and limb that was on the table. All right, enough of that. I've spent more time on Smart Elections and the fact that their case has been dismissed in Rockland County, but I really wanted you to understand why it was dismissed. It was dismissed based on lack of standing. And how did we get there? Because the plaintiffs were coerced into dropping the case. So I'm sure it's plain as day to the judge what's going on. And sadly, there's nothing much the judge can do about it. Now, Smart Elections can appeal. And if they can get a little more evidence to support their position that the plaintiffs were coerced, they could probably win. Theoretically, they could win that appeal. All right, moving on. Next issue that I want to make you aware of, if you're not aware of it already, is that the Election Truth Alliance has filed their lawsuit in Pennsylvania. Now, it's not across all of Pennsylvania. It's addressing 3 counties. 3 counties in Pennsylvania. Is this the right? Yes. Allegheny County, Cambria County, and Erie County. So they're targeting those counties. 3 counties where they've gathered up evidence that they feel is compelling enough to win a case, a lawsuit, to compel to get a court to persuade a judge to issue an order to the Board of Elections in these 3 counties to simply recount the votes. That's it. That's all Smart Elections wanted. That's all the Election Truth Alliance wants. Just recount the votes. Really? What's wrong with doing that? There is so much evidence that these elections were manipulated. And again, the more, like I say, the more you learn about this stuff, the more ridiculous it is when you look at it. Like you just, sometimes I laugh out loud when I see this stuff. It's just so absurd that anyone would go, yeah, that's normal, isn't it? No, it's not normal. So let me show you some of the evidence that they've cited in their complaint, the Election Truth Alliance. So here is page 19, and I'm going to dive a little deeper in this. And if you're watching this live, you will see something that I've done the legwork to figure out, data that I've crunched, information that I've gathered, and will be revealed to you live tonight related to this issue. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. Well, it's hardly zooming in. I might as well be in the picture too then. So this is page 19 of the Election Truth Alliance's complaint. And on this particular page, when they're like just raising piece of evidence after evidence after evidence that suggests, hey, this election wasn't right, Your Honor, will you please let us recount the votes in these counties? Because it kind of seems like something's not right here. So page 19, what we're looking at here are 17 counties where the total number of votes exceeded the total number of registered voters. Yeah, let that sink in. More votes were cast in these counties than there are registered voters. And I've looked into this. I am Canadian. I confess that's why the maple leaf in the Policy Watch logo. Yeah. I am Canadian, so I'm not that, I'm not as familiar as I would be with American politics and elections if I was American. But talking to people and asking people about this, yeah, apparently there's no good reason why you could ever have more votes in a precinct than there are voters, registered voters. Like I wondered, like, well, do you have some exception for weary travelers? Yeah, good sir, I find myself far from home on this election night. Would you do me the kindness of letting me vote in your county? Something like that. No, you have to vote in your county. I won't digress, but that's a really big issue. You have to vote in your county, and you have to prove that you live there and all that kind of stuff. You have to vote in your precinct where you are a registered voter. So you can't have people shuffling about voting in precincts where they're not a registered voter, and yet we have 17 precincts in Pennsylvania alone where more than 100% of registered voters somehow voted in them. So obviously, ladies and gentlemen, somebody is manufacturing votes. Let me know in the comments if you think there's some other explanation. I will point out in Northumberland County, over 1,000%. We're looking at a voter turnout that is 1,265% of the registered voters. Someone's manufacturing votes, ladies and gentlemen. So the thing that you should be wondering, as I wondered the moment I saw this, is like, okay. Who won those precincts? That's what I want to know. If they have more than 100% voter turnout, who won those precincts? Stick around and you'll see. All right, so Here's page 21. This is a heat map graph. I won't go through explaining this. I'm in the process of making a video. It takes a long time to make a video. But essentially what you're looking at when you see two blobs like this, what these heat maps are supposed to look like is basically a ball. And very quickly, just to orient you to what you're looking at voter turnout on the x-axis that's going across, and vote share on the y-axis. It's going up and down. And what you should see in normal circumstances is something that roughly looks like a ball. It could be oval, it could be blobby this way or something, but roughly a ball. And when you're looking down at it, when you're looking at it, imagine that you're looking at a topographical map of a mountain. You know how those maps go? You know that. So these different colors, they're showing a higher concentration. So it's kind of like a mountain of votes. Picture a mountain of votes. That's essentially what you're looking at with these heat maps. So looking at it that way, it kind of looks like there's two mountains here, right? There's a little mountain down at the bottom, very close to the point of origin. I don't know, the bottom of the y-axis, right along the bottom. You see that little mountain there? I wish I had a pointer. And then you've got this other much taller mountain that's way up. And so that tall mountain is showing much higher vote share for Donald Trump. And it's showing that higher vote share occurs at higher voter turnouts. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you should not see vote share correlating with voter turnout. What that means is, apparently, according to the data, as more voters went to these precincts, they just tended to vote for Donald Trump. So what that is a fingerprint of ballot stuffing. And what we're looking at here is a bit of a classic Russian tale. This is called a bit of a Russian tale, although a classic Russian tale would be kind of thinner and really moving up, like getting right in there, right into that upper right-hand corner. Like it'd be a thin little tail going right up into that upper right-hand corner, literally showing that, there are some precincts with 100% voter turnout, and those precincts, 100% of the votes went to Donald Trump. So the reason why that happens is because in vote stuffing, in ballot stuffing, if you want to win an election by cheating, and you stuff a whole bunch of extra ballots that have all been marked for the candidate that you want to win, you stuff those ballots in the ballot boxes, and so then when people are counting the ballots, they go, oh wow, boy, lots of people voting for Vladimir Putin in this ballot box. Okay, well, I guess Vladimir Putin won in this precinct, whatever. And it doesn't seem that unusual. But then when you graph all the precincts and then you line them all up, if you were to organize them from lowest voter turnout to highest voter turnout, if you see a graph that looks like this, ladies and gentlemen, I'll make this a little bigger, just very little, then something's not right. This is another way of looking at that same thing. That graph that we were just looking at, it's called a heat map. Imagine, like I said, you're looking down at piles of votes. If you piled them, you made little mountains out of them. This is kind of like you're looking sideways kind of at it. So this mountain is piling rather high around the 85 to 90% area, which is very high turnout, by the way. The turnout in the US presidential election was very low overall, very ridiculously low. Given what's at stake, I can't believe that everyone didn't go out and vote. But gee whiz, in all precincts, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris. All right, Pennsylvania. I missed seeing the PA there. Pennsylvania, all precincts. Now, sometimes when the ETA shows graphs like that, they'll say all precincts, but what they mean is all precincts that they have analyzed. So I'd have to read more of page 21 to know whether this is, I don't think it's literally all precincts, because I know how much time and effort that would take to crunch all that data. And that's why they're invariably picking 3 counties, because it's a lot of work to do all this number crunching. So this is all the precincts I think that they've analyzed. And you see a very, very, again, ridiculously powerful correlation between voter turnout and vote share for Donald Trump. And in case you're wondering, why is it kind of mirrored? Well, because we're just looking at vote share between 2 presidential candidates. Now, there were some third-party candidates, but they get very little of the vote. So essentially, you're looking at 100% of the vote being divvied up between 2 candidates. So if one candidate gets 70% of the vote, the other candidate's going to get 30%. If one candidate gets 55% of the vote, the other candidate will get around 45% of the vote. So that's why, if in cases where a lot of votes are very extremely high, then the other votes are extremely low. And you can see, even in voter turnout as high as 70, 75%, Donald Trump's votes are really pressed up against the bottom here, just hanging out low, below 10%. And Kamala Harris is kicking butt, getting across the board. You just see it, that you can see that concentration of votes, very high for Kamala Harris and very low for Donald Trump. But then all of a sudden, after about 75% voter turnout, we see the fingerprint of ballot stuffing, the classic fingerprint of ballot stuffing. And for whatever reason, when these precincts have the voter turnout that's higher than 75%, then Donald Trump gets all of the votes. And the bottom graph is showing the similar kind of thing, but you don't get that high resolution. You just imagine collecting all of these little dots and adding them all up. That's what you've got in the bottom graph. I won't spend too much time looking at that. Oh, look at this. What do we got? Okay, so where am I here? I am, yes, on this page. So now, another thing I just thought I'd mention is, along with this, around the same time that the Election Truth Alliance filed their lawsuit, they also posted this Substack article. And, it's entitled "These Numbers Don't Add Up." And they went through a fair amount of detail in that article. And they touched on some things that they didn't fully lay out in their official complaint. So I thought I'd mention that. Now, I've produced a video going over both of these things: the lawsuit in Pennsylvania and some of the other tomfoolery, some of the other weirdness that the Election Truth Alliance has found in Pennsylvania. But didn't all necessarily get into the lawsuit. So let me talk about some of that stuff. So first, I think I can make this nice and big. So first, there was this issue of voter turnout anomalies, where you've got these 17 precincts across 15 different counties where the voter turnout was higher than 100%. And hey, Allegheny County there at 102%, something like that, you could just say, maybe somebody mixed up something. Well, I don't know, like 102%. Again, when you bear in mind that, I don't know, I think I don't want to just make up stuff. Let me look this up here for you. What was the voter turnout in the 2024 U.S. election? Like, I think it was like below 60% or something like that. Let me see. 65.3%. So the first thing I'm seeing from census.gov. All right. So bear that in mind. Let's see. Can I very quickly corroborate that number? Again, I don't want to lose you. But just wanting to see if I can corroborate that. 1908. 2024's rate of 64% was the second highest, tied with 1960. So apparently the 66% turnout rate in 2020 was the highest since 1908. And 2024's rate of 64% was the second highest, tied with 1960. So bear that in mind. Bear that in mind as we talk about this. So if the average turnout is 64, 65%, I think you can then kind of come to understand that even a turnout of 102% is kind of ridiculous. 1,265%, like over 1,000% voter turnout. That's when you can kind of just take it to the bank at that point and just go, yeah, people are cheating. People are like rigging the election, and they can't control exactly how things pan out when they're inventing ballots and shifting ballots around. They can't control it perfectly. And that's actually a point that I want to make here is I don't want anyone walking away going, come on, it's 17, it's 17 precincts, counties, 17 counties in Pennsylvania. They had more than 100% turnout. Big deal. That's the tip of the iceberg. You see, if you're inventing ballots or if you're shifting ballots from one person to another and you can't exactly control where they end up, if you don't do it carefully, then you could end up putting so many votes in a given county or in a given precinct. These are precincts, but they're precincts that exist in different counties. So 17 precincts across 15 counties. And again, sometimes just while I'm nattering on, I mean to say one word and I say the other word. So just to make it very clear, we're looking at 17 precincts across 15 counties in Pennsylvania where voter turnout was more than 100%. But that is a symptom of a much larger problem. So essentially, if you're inventing votes, if you're manufacturing votes, or if you're shifting votes away from one person to another, and you're just depositing them in a county, and you can't necessarily control exactly what precinct they go in, and maybe you're kind of blindly doing this, and you don't know how many votes are already in that precinct. You could end up doing this kind of thing. Imagine just the good old-fashioned ballot stuffing, even with paper ballots. You're stuffing some more ballots in this box. you kind of have to be worried about, well, how many ballots were already in there? I'm going to stuff 25 more ballots in here. But what if there's only 100 registered voters? And what if there was already 92 votes in there and you stuff 25 votes in there? You didn't know how many votes were already in there. See, that's the problem. That's what causes this. So this is done electronically, invariably, but the same issue stands. As you're doing it, you don't necessarily know how many people on the ground literally voted in a given precinct. You're somewhere else, theoretically. You're whatever. I don't know how they did it, but manufacturing votes, shifting votes around. Every now and then, this kind of thing theoretically would happen. So this is one of the questions people naturally ask. If people were like just stuffing ballots in, making up ballots, making up votes, manufacturing votes, then shouldn't you see a few precincts where there's actually more votes than there are voters? Well, that would be a good question. And here's your answer. Yes, you would, or that is possible. And in this case, we do see that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the question that everybody wants to know, all right, who won these precincts? Don't you want to know that? Don't you want to know that? Who won those precincts? Well, this is where things get really interesting. Are you ready? Are you ready to see who won those precincts? Those crazy precincts where more than 100% voter turnout was realized in a nation that has where 64 or 65% voter turnout is the second highest turnout in history. And yet we've got 17 precincts where there's more than 100% turnout. Are you ready? Drum roll. You know what? I think I might have a drum roll. No, I just have that. Maybe I can. Okay, that's my drum roll. All right, here we go. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Feast your eyes. Take it all in. All right. So this, I had to go and get this data. All the data that you see that's shaded. The Election Truth Alliance has not published that. I had to go dig that up. But dig I did, and this is what I found. And so in the far right hand columns, what you're seeing is of those 17 precincts, those are precincts where one party alone commanded more than 100% of the vote. So they must be, some of those votes must be false. They must be fraudulent. So where there's not a bright red box, the two percentages together add up to more than 100%. But in a case like that, somebody's cheated, but you don't know who, because each one could point to the other and go, well, they must have stuffed some extra votes in then. That must be them that did it. It wasn't me. Let's see, can I get myself bigger here? Yeah, but then I'm pressed up again. What's this look like? No, that's not good either. Right? So in these top four, there's only five precincts that are like that across these 17 precincts, where each party could go, yeah, I know the total is more than 100%, but it must have been them. They must have cheated. They must have stuffed some in. But in these bright red ones, they can't say that. They can't say that because in all of those bright red cases, their own votes are still more than 100% of the vote. So they stuffed them in. Sorry, somebody stuffed them in. And stuff they did. And remember that Northumberland precinct, county? The precinct in Northumberland County? Yeah. More than 1,000% voter turnout for Donald Trump. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to pretend not to see these 4 precincts where the Democratic candidate for president got more than 100% of the vote. So, ladies and gentlemen, this speaks, let's see, can I make myself full screen? This speaks to a theory I have, and I could spend all night just talking about this theory, but the short version of it is, I see this evidence for wide-scale voter fraud that clearly, to my mind, occurred in the 2024 election. And you think, okay, this clearly happened. How did the government of the United States, that commands the most extensive intelligence network on the planet Earth, on the face of the Earth, the most sophisticated intelligence network, they hear chatter, they're listening in on this, they're watching that, they got the satellites, they got, the phone taps, whatever, the spies and all that. They know about someone who's planning a bombing somewhere over in the Middle East before it happens. Because they're hearing the chatter, about a bomb that's going to happen. You telling me they didn't know someone was trying to rig this election? I don't buy that. They must have known. So why didn't they stop it? So my theory is, and I've developed this theory by looking at data, similar to the data that I've been showing you tonight. My theory is that perhaps both parties have been doing this. And the problem is that both parties know that the other party is doing it. And there's some sort of Mexican standoff going, well, hey, if you turn us in, we're going to turn you in. And do we really want to do that? Do we really want the American public to never trust their politicians again, to never trust their political parties ever again, to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they've been rigging the elections for who knows how long? That would be pretty devastating. And people would be facing really serious jail time. So I think there's some sort of deal, some sort of blackmail kind of thing going on, and maybe even an agreement that where, and again, this is completely speculation. I'm just trying to figure out, why would such blatant cheating be allowed to occur? And then why wouldn't there be a response to it? Why not? Why wouldn't they recount the votes? And as you can see, there's, based on Smart Elections, case in Rockland County being dismissed because the plaintiffs were coerced into dropping the case. There are serious players out there who are absolutely committed to ensuring that these votes do not get recounted. Why not? What would they discover? What indeed? So I wonder if both parties just said, okay, well, this is the last one then. This is the last election where we cheat. And then from now on, after this, we have to play it fair and square. And then let us never speak of this again. I can't help but wonder if some deal like that has been made. But back to the data. This data suggests that both parties cheated, but the Republican Party, whatever cheating is going on here, this data suggests they do it more than 5 times more than the Democrats. So what I did here is I simply added up the total of all the percentages that exceeded 100% for a given precinct. And that's fairly simply, like, you can kind of more or less get a ballpark figure in your mind, looking at the Democrats. Although, I remember how I did this now. What I'm looking at here, I didn't just add them up. Forgive me, I feel I should show my face as I confess this. I didn't just add them up. What I did was I looked at just the amount in excess of 100%. Hence my term down here. Look at the bottom, when you're looking at the totals. Total percentage of votes in excess of registered voters. It's not just the total percentage of votes in these precincts where there was an excess. It's the total amount that is in excess. So if we were to just focus on the top one for the Democrats here, which is Lehigh County, Precinct 490, I wouldn't add that to the total as 188%. I would just add the 88%, 88.14%, because that's the amount in excess of 100%. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is, like, these are votes that are for sure cheat votes. Like, they have to be manufactured. They have to be. And probably more than that, because, like I said, 64%, 65% voter turnout across the entirety of the United States. And that's the second highest turnout in history. So, even 100%, if you get 100% voter turnout, you basically know, well, about 35% of those votes were probably cheat votes too, but you can't prove it. But this you can kind of prove, like, it's a slam dunk. Like, sorry, you had to make up those votes. You had to just manufacture those out of thin air. And so the total percentage of manufactured votes, if you will, this is just to give us a basis of comparison. The Democrats kind of clearly manufactured, a percentage here in excess of 100% that is 350%. But the Republicans manufactured, according to the data, over 1,900%. So 1,900% versus 350%. So in truth, I developed that theory a while ago. And if you've been following these live streams on Wednesday nights, you'll see Brandy also has the same theory, because when we find ourselves looking at the data, whether it's a heat map or a scatter graph or a down ballot drop-off rate, we often kind of find ourselves looking at it going, like, yeah, the Republicans sure seem to have been, like, deep into the cheating in 2024, like to just a ridiculous degree where you just literally laugh out loud when you look at the data. But then you kind of look back at 2020, 2016, and you see some stuff with the Democrats where you're kind of thinking, well, okay, if we're calling this cheating, Then how do we explain that? Because in some cases in 2020, Donald Trump had these crazy negative down ballot drop-off rates. And the Democrats had quite high, positive down ballot differences, as the ETA would call them. What was different is it wasn't across the board the way it is in 2024, like bing, bang, 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 every single county, every single one, where it's just, again, laugh out loud, crazy, ridiculous. But that seems to be how the Republicans played it in 2024. But it kind of seems like, I could show you graphs now. I mean, I don't want to make this live stream about that. But yeah, I could show you plenty of scatter plot graphs, which are kind of my personal favorite, where kind of looks like the Democrats are doing it too. But from what I can tell, they tend to have their algorithm kick in much earlier than the Republicans do. I don't know why this is. But as you saw in the earlier graphs, like this one, if we look at the top graph, everything's more or less kind of looking normal until we hit 75% voter turnout. And then boom, all the votes go to Trump. Boom. So that's not normal. And now I'm trying to remember what the exact point I was making, but maybe it'll come back to me as I come back to where I was, which was here. And then what was I looking at? Maybe this will remind me. Yeah. So, right. Sorry. This is the point I wanted to make. It did come back to me. Sometimes I'll see little patterns in these dots, and we kind of see it here. This is not the best case, because it's not a great case, but you see this concentration in a high concentration, like between 40% and 70% voter turnout. You see a really, high concentration of those votes for Kamala Harris and very low concentration for Donald Trump. Well, that's a bit unusual, quite frankly, for them to all be compressed right up against the 100% kind of mark. That's a bit unusual. That's not the best example, so I could show you other examples. I won't right now, because that's not really what we're talking about, but I could show you other examples where it kind of looks like an algorithm kicked in much earlier, like basically right from the get-go to help out the Democrats. But it kicks in earlier and it's subtle. Whereas what I see, this is just my opinion, based on the data that I see, it appears that for whatever reason, the Republicans don't start messing around with the votes until a much higher voter turnout or a higher number of votes are cast. So that's what I see in the data. So I do see evidence, actually, of both parties cheating. All right. So here's another thing that the Election Truth Alliance has found in Pennsylvania. In particular, Cambria County. Now, this particular argument right here, I did not find in the complaint that they filed in their lawsuit. This is from their article, their Substack article. Now, some of these numbers, I think perhaps the totals, if I'm remembering correctly, these totals that you see in the far left tall blue bars of this graph, I think that's mentioned in the lawsuit, that there is 236 missing ballots between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. the number of ballots dropped by 236 ballots. This is just in Cambria County. And by the way, I'll point out, if you look at the header here, this is just mail-in ballots in just Cambria County. All right, so 236 ballots seem to go missing. And those ballots, the data suggests, just disappeared, and they didn't go to anyone. They didn't go to Trump. They didn't go to Harris. They just disappeared. But as we move to the right across this graph, in my video, I kind of animate this graph from left to right and explain each bar as we go. So do take the time, ladies and gentlemen, to check out that video. It's just titled, a very simple title, Pennsylvania Files Lawsuit in Pennsylvania, I think. All right, so moving from left to right, we see that between 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., 236 ballots went missing in total. Now, two other figures that the ETA has is how many Democrat ballots were returned. So they seem to have a count for that. But then how many votes were officially recorded for a candidate? That's another number. So yeah, 7,596 ballots were returned for Democrats. And yet only 7,541 votes were registered for Harris. So she lost 55. And you might be thinking, no big deal, whatever. All right, so moving past that, one number that the ETA has found in Cambria County is 6,475 mail-in ballots were returned for, Republicans, Republican ballots returned. And yet, 7,328 votes were counted for Trump. So that's 853. That's a 853 vote surplus for Trump. How did he get votes when Republican ballot, only 6,000? How did he get 7,328 votes when only 6,475 Republican ballots were returned? Well, here's the explanation, or here's an explanation that the math suggests. Apparently, and this is the part that I'm foggy about, and I've been asking the ETA to tell me more about this number here. This is the number that concerns me the most, because it's presented as a vague number. They say about 1,034 votes were lost from third-party candidates. The same way Harris lost 55 votes here, apparently third-party candidates lost over 1,000. But they say about, and I think that's because there's like 3 different reports and they give different numbers. I believe that's why they say about, but they arrive at this figure here. So it is a bit vague, and I'd like to learn more about it. But they say about, 1,000 votes were lost for third-party candidates. When you add the 55 votes that were lost for Harris to the 1,034 votes that were lost to third-party candidates, you get a total number of lost votes, what I call total deficits, of 1,089. Now, if you subtract the 236 votes that just went missing, they didn't go to anybody, from 1,089, you get 853, which is exactly Donald Trump's vote surplus. So it does appear here, ladies and gentlemen, that votes were shifted around. The data suggests that votes were shifted around and moved to Donald Trump. There you go. That's what that's saying. That's what the numbers are suggesting there. Now, if that wasn't enough for you, along a similar vein, just a couple of days ago, This Will Hold posted another, This Will Hold publishes like amazingly kind of concerning findings, developments in the election world on Substack. So it's kind of an epic account to follow. I highly recommend it. Do give This Will Hold a follow on Substack. And tends to make really highly concerning, contentious assertions, if you will. So the title here is saying, how did 6 million people vote in Burke County, Florida, when it doesn't exist? And yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is apparently what This Will Hold is finding. I'll dive a little deeper into this. I haven't had time to discuss this with This Will Hold, but I'll give you some of the finer points here. What the theory that This Will Hold is putting together based on the data that they're seeing is that a number of phony counties appeared to come into existence on election night. So what they've discovered, what appears to be a vote banking system with the DDHQ, I believe that stands for Decision Desk Headquarters. So it appears to be a vote banking system with Decision Desk Headquarters served as a staging database. And so on election night, Decision Desk appeared to be holding a large bank of extra votes that were spread across fake counties on election night. And then vote totals decreased for one or more presidential candidates in at least 4 states in both the Decision Desk and the NEP Edison data feeds, suggesting that votes may have been removed from the system of record during election night reporting. And votes removed from Harris appear to have been replaced with votes for Trump, potentially sourced from the vote bank tied to the non-existent counties. And so here are the non-existent counties. These counties appeared to come into existence on vote night and were holding votes. There were people apparently were voting in these non-existent counties. Burke County, Florida. They sound real. They sound nice, like nice places. Stafford County, Pennsylvania. Allen County, North Carolina. Oklahoma County in Michigan. And Hamilton County in Georgia. None of which actually exist. So that's rather recent breaking news, and I probably should have shown you this. I saw one of the cute things in this Substack article is I believe This Will Hold is now selling a T-shirt that says something like, "I voted in Burke County, Florida," just to make the point. So I'm starting to lose my voice, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just turn my mic off here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've nattered on much longer than I had hoped. I really must learn how to get more concise. But I literally wear out my voice. I've got some fishermen's friends around here. But I did get through everything I wanted to tell you about. So thank you very much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Do check out the merch shop. You can get cool t-shirts like the one I'm wearing, cool mugs like this. Excuse me, sorry. Just thought I'd demonstrate how handy a Policy Watch mug can be. Yeah, check out the merch shop. You can find the links in my video descriptions. But yeah, enough said. I've gone over a number of things, but that's because I haven't had one of these live streams for a month. And so these were just the highlights. There's so many stories that I didn't cover that are all speak to the same kind of tomfoolery that the election system in the US is clearly rigged and there's all kinds of nonsense going on. And you've seen just some of the data, just some of the highlights tonight. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Be well, take good care of yourselves. We will all get through this. And I will see you in the next one.